In what's become an annual tradition, Notre Dame football celebrated St. Patrick's Day with a massive recruiting spree. And for the fourth year in a row, it was a big success. All that and more coming up on today's edition of Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, and welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. Today is Tuesday, March 19th, and thank you for getting your day started right here by making this your first listen of the day. I'm Tyler Wojciak, and I'm the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer covering college football for Fox Sports, and you can watch this show on YouTube, or you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. If you are watching along on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, or if you're listening to the podcast, please take a moment, rate the show 5 stars, leave a review, and subscribe if you have not already. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Unfortunately, I am not here to talk to you today about Notre Dame's prospects in the upcoming men's basketball tournament. Unfortunately, they were snubbed by the committee. Micah Shrewsbury's guys are not going to be dancing this year, and even though we're all surprised by it this Monday morning, it just didn't happen for the Irish this year. Personally, I feel like the committee and all the members are cowards for not placing the Irish in, despite the fact that they were like 6 games below 500 and never really had a chance to make the tournament from the beginning of the season. But at least we do have Neil Ivey's squad, although they did get a brutal draw in their bracket. I think they ended up in the same region as South Carolina. So that is not ideal, but at least we will have one team to cheer for during March Madness. But in all seriousness, though, we've got a lot of recruiting to talk about today. Notre Dame celebrated St. Patrick's Day with a big recruiting spree, and by all accounts, it was another big success. They call it the Pot of Gold Day. And if you're listening to this, or you're watching this, and you're not really familiar with the Pot of Gold Day and what it is exactly, basically, it's like the first big day for Notre Dame's next recruiting class. So right now, they're obviously working hard on getting everyone in their class of 2025 to commit come signing day. They have 18 total commitments right now, but this is the first big day for the class of 2026. Notre Dame has been doing this for 4 years now, but it feels like every year that they do it, it becomes a bigger and bigger deal, and they're leveraging St. Patrick's Day and the holiday and the Irish themes and all of that, and they're really using that to their advantage as a way to stick out and sort of stand above the rest in what is normally not a very newsy time in the recruiting calendar, but it is very important for Notre Dame. It's particularly important given Marcus Freeman's recruiting strategy. We know that he likes to recruit guys early and often and get them to commit early. It's a big reason why Notre Dame has 18 current commitments in its class of 2025, and there is not another school in the top 50 or maybe even in the top 100, to be honest with you. I just couldn't find any who have more than 11 total commitments. So this is what his plan is, and so far it's worked out really well. Notre Dame currently has the number 1 ranked class in the class of 2025. It's not going to end up there, but this is what he does, and it makes sense because I think when you work this hard this early and you get guys to commit, you're not worried as much about guys decommitting because you get guys who are really in it for the long haul, want to be a part of it, and you can also build camaraderie with the class. You can have all the prospects get to meet each other, hang out when they come into town on official visits, and so far that has been very successful for Notre Dame. So in this year's Pot of Gold Day, Notre Dame offered nearly 100 prospects in the class of 2026, and this matters a lot, and you can even see in Notre Dame's class of 2025, of the 18 current commitments that they have right now, 8 of them were offered on Pot of Gold Day last year, and this year, Notre Dame was rewarded with 2 commitments, one in the class of 2025 in Jerome Bettis Jr., who I'll talk more about in segment 2. And they also landed the first commitment in the class of 2026 in Dylan Faison, the wide receiver who is also the younger brother of current Notre Dame wide receiver Jordan Faison. So this is a really, really important day, and I said earlier that they offered nearly 100 prospects. So let's go through all of them one by here, starting with no, I'm just kidding. I wouldn't do that. We don't have we don't have that kind of time today, but I do want to go over a few guys who stand out in particular. Notre Dame offered Kendrick Harrison, who is the #1 tight end in the class, and he's the #2 overall player. The fact that a tight end is ranked 2nd overall in the class is pretty rare, and that just shows you the type of rare athlete that Harrison is, and he had great things to say to Steve Wiltfong from 24/7 Sports about Notre Dame and their offer. Said it's a dream come true, and what he likes the most about Notre Dame is how they develop tight ends. And, Notre Dame is tight end but they have not landed a 5-star tight end since Michael Mayer. They have come close. Eli Raridan was just outside the top 50. I believe he's the #2 or 3 ranked tight end in the composite rankings for his class, but still, it's been a few years since they landed a true 5-star at the position, and if they're able to land Harrison, that would change that. They also offered Lamar Brown out of Baton Rouge. I think this is important because, one, he's the #3 overall player in the class. He plays offensive tackle, which is a position that Notre Dame recruits very well. And Lamar Brown also attends the same high school that Jaden Ausberry went to. They were former teammates, and Lamar Brown had great things to say about Ausberry and Notre Dame. And even though it's a long shot that they get Brown, I feel like most people who are most top prospects from the state of Louisiana usually go to LSU, especially one in the backyard. Baton Rouge University Lab is where Lamar Brown goes to high school. But hey, Notre Dame was able to land Ausberry out of there, so maybe they'll have a chance with Brown as well. Notre Dame also offered the #1 edge rusher in the entire class, Hezekiah Harris, who told Steve Wiltfong that he considers Notre Dame an elite program. A couple other big names, Savion Hyder, who's the #1 running back in the class, plus guys like Zach Fort, Devin Carter. These guys are some of the top prospects in the entire country. You're looking at top 10, top 20, sometimes top 50 prospects overall, and it tells me that Notre Dame is going after the biggest names in this class. And considering Marcus Freeman's strategy, he is not one to waste time on players who he doesn't think he can ultimately get a commitment from and then sign come signing days. So I think that Notre Dame is being a little bit more aggressive this year. They have had success on the recruiting trail since Marcus Freeman has come on board, landing more top guys who are in the top 100 and stuff like that. But they have not landed very many top 50 guys. Part of that is because they haven't been as aggressive, but I think this year is a change in that policy, and I also think that Notre Dame is really banking on having a really big season on the field this year that could really help them as they try to recruit some of these top guys who typically end up at the Georgias of the world, the Alabamas, the Ohio States. Like Notre Dame, even though recruiting has definitely leveled up under Marcus Freeman, it has not leveled up quite to the level that we thought it would. Once Marcus Freeman took over, we thought he'd start pulling in a bunch of 5-star guys. Now, obviously, NIL and all the circumstances there are a big reason why it probably hasn't happened to the level that we were hoping it would. But that doesn't mean that it can't happen. And I think that one nice thing about this Pot of Gold Day, leveraging St. Patrick's Day and all of that, is it allows Notre Dame to stand out. They're able to separate themselves from everyone else because, like, a lot of what these coaches do, a lot of the messaging is the same. A lot of the bells and whistles look the same. And sure, every school has different strategy and they have their own unique approach to some guys. But I feel like, when you're a top prospect who's getting recruited by 50 different schools, a lot of it is going to start to sound the same, and it can all sort of get mundane, and it's really hard to separate yourself, especially when you're a place like Notre Dame who can't just come in with like a mega bag to these high school prospects and get them to sign on the dotted line. So Notre Dame has to take advantage of the opportunities when they get them. I think the Pot of Gold Day is a great thing that they do every single year. And obviously Notre Dame has a long way to go with a lot of these top prospects, but I think overall this day was a huge success. They made waves with big name prospects out there, and it's really just the start of what's going to be another really critical class for Marcus Freeman. But today was a big day, Sunday was a big day, and it's going to be really interesting to follow how Notre Dame continues to recruit some of these top guys and if they're ultimately able to land them in the class of 2026. All right, offers are great, right? But it's even better, commitments, and Notre Dame got 2 of those on Sunday. More on that coming up next. This week's March Madness Bracket Highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest. Just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs, these guys were able to take it to the next level. The Yukon Huskies can only be described as an armada. This top-seeded team is as hardcore as it gets out there, so it's no wonder they've landed the top overall seed in the NCAA tournament. They're one of the favorites to win it all, despite 4 of the 6 Power 6 conference champions standing in their way in the East region. Take the Nissan Rogue Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada, and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Today's episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV also offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing television. And it provides access to millions of movies and television episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big professional leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels lets you dive into all the games, analysis, highlights, and more to stay up to date on the latest in the world of sports. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, and cooking videos as well. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Well, it felt like a long time coming, but it finally happened. Jerome Bettis Jr. announced his commitment to Notre Dame on St. Patrick's Day. And in case you're too young to remember, or if you got hit by a bus, pun intended, Jerome Bettis Sr., Jerome Bettis Jr.'s dad, played at Notre Dame from 1990 through 1992. He scored 27 touchdowns in 3 years. Then he was selected 10th overall in the 1993 NFL Draft. He won Offensive Rookie of the Year for the LA Rams, and then he went on to win a Super Bowl with the Pittsburgh Steelers and was eventually inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And you might be inclined to think that, oh, well, of course he was always going to commit to Notre Dame. He's Jerome Bettis' kid. That's always what was going to happen there. That's actually not really the case. But let's dive into Jerome Bettis Jr. first before we start talking about his dad. He's listed at 6'2", 195 pounds, and he's really not a highly ranked prospect on most recruiting sites. He's outside the top 600 players nationally on the 24/7 Sports Composite, which includes the rankings from all the major recruiting sites. And he's ranked 113th out of the wide receivers in his class. But I think his offer list is pretty impressive compared to his ranking. He's got offers from schools like Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Arkansas, Missouri, South Carolina, Louisville, Boston College, Georgia Tech, and several others, including some top ACC programs. And I think that some of you might think, oh, well, he just got those offers because of his last name. I actually think that his last name had the opposite effect. I think that he had a limited amount of scholarships compared to what he could have received, because I think most schools probably looked at his last name was like, okay, well, he's always going to end up at Notre Dame. And even though that's how it felt like to a lot of people, Notre Dame really had to work hard for this one. And I think that's why it took so long before he finally announced his commitment with the Irish. So according to Tom Van Haren of ESPN, Jerome Bettis Jr. started playing youth football as a running back wearing number 36 like his dad, but then he changed positions in the 7th grade and changed his number to number 4 because he wanted to carve his own path. I totally get that, and I respect it, but also you have to understand, with a name like that, you can't really ever hide from your dad's legacy. It kind of reminds me of that one tweet that went viral a few years ago when Bronny James said he didn't want to wear his dad's number because he didn't want people to know who he is. And then someone quote tweeted it and was like, coming in at number 0, LeBron James Jr. And then there's like a picture of someone in the crowd like, yo, who is that? Right? So he's never really going to be able to escape his father's legacy, nor should he. And I think that he wants, or he has an appreciation for what his dad accomplished. But I also understand being a kid and you don't want to live in your dad's shadow and you want to make a name for yourself. And I think that's exactly what Jerome Bettis Jr. is doing. And from the Notre Dame side, I feel like if they thought he was a lock and that he was always going to commit to Notre Dame, and they didn't really have to put in that much effort, they certainly did not act like that, because by all accounts, Marcus Freeman and the staff made Bettis Jr. a priority from day one and recruited him just as hard as any other recruit, if not a little harder. According to Tom Loy of 24/7 Sports, Marcus Freeman Jr. made Bettis Jr. a priority and reached out to him as consistently, if not more, than any other recruit. And I think that stands out to me because, again, Marcus Freeman is a very busy guy. He has a lot of different recruits he's got to talk to. And if he felt like Jerome Bettis Jr. was always going to commit to Notre Dame and he didn't really think that highly of him as a player, then he really would not have put in that much effort. Like, they don't just do it for the sake of doing it. He's not just doing it for the sake of appeasing a Notre Dame legacy. I think that Marcus Freeman and his staff really view him as a kid with a lot of potential who can make a name for himself at Notre Dame. And it was really good for them in the class that they were able to ultimately land him in this class. But I think we need to be clear about the prospects of Jerome Bettis Jr. He's a very raw prospect. That's a big reason why he's not really ranked that high on any of the recruiting sites. He's a big physical kid, obviously not as big as his dad, but he's a little bit taller, a little bit leaner, and he's really good at making contested catches. He's just one of those players who you watch him and you're like, okay, that's a good football player. He's very physical. He can go up and make 50-50 balls look easy. He also plays defense as well. I think the biggest knock on him is that he doesn't really have that like crazy athleticism. He doesn't have freakish speed or anything like that. If you watch his film, he doesn't really generate a ton of separation from the guys who are guarding him. But I feel like there's a chance that if he goes to Notre Dame, they might tinker with him and figure out what position he's best suited for at the college level. Because like I said, he does play safety. He's a big player. He could be a big safety for Notre Dame at the back end of that defense. And, you know, I think he's so young. Like, he's in the class of 2025. He still has a couple more years left, or he has another year left of high school football. Like, I still think that he has a lot of time to really mature and develop into a college football player. Like, this is not a player that you're going to see getting a lot of early playing time at Notre Dame. But I think that, especially coming from Jerome Bettis Sr., he is the type of work ethic, the football pedigree that Notre Dame wants. And Notre Dame has clearly made it a priority to recruit the sons of really great NFL players, not even just Notre Dame. Like, look at Ivan Taylor, Kennedy Urlacher last year. Like, Notre Dame has been recruiting players who have NFL dads or NFL family members, things like that. And I think that a big reason why is those families understand the appeal of Notre Dame's message, the 4 for 40, the life after football, all of that. And Jerome Bettis Jr. is a prime example of that. As for the class as a whole, Notre Dame is still ranked number 1. This commitment really doesn't do anything to change that or hurt that. It might affect Notre Dame's average recruiting ranking for each prospect because they have 18 guys. And even though there are some really talented prospects up there at the top, Bettis is certainly on the lower end of that. But I feel like this is a great story and a good addition to this class because he's a low-risk, high-reward type of prospect that is eventually going to be able to help Notre Dame down the line. And I'm really excited to continue following this story because I think it's really cool that Notre Dame was able to get the son of Jerome Bettis back on the team and keeping it within the Notre Dame family. It's great to see, and I think it just adds to Marcus Freeman and what he's trying to do with his team as a whole, and specifically this recruiting class. Okay, coming up next, Notre Dame landed its first commitment in the class of 2026 on Sunday, who also happens to be a relative of another Irish player. The Locked On College Basketball Bracket Breakdown Show is now available on the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. Experts Andy Patton and Isaac Shade break down their brackets and discuss everything that you need to know to fill out a winning bracket and prepare for this year's NCAA tournament. Find the Locked On Bracket Breakdown now on the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines, and you can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. All right, we'll wrap up today's show with another commitment from a Notre Dame legacy, although I don't think that Jordan Faison is technically a legacy because he is currently a student athlete at Notre Dame. But Jordan Faison's little brother, Dylan, became the first commitment in Notre Dame's class of 2026 on Sunday. Like his older brother, Dylan is an absolute stud at lacrosse and football, and he expects to play both when he's in college, and their games are also very similar. Dylan is a little bit undersized. He's listed at 5'11", 170 pounds, but I don't really buy that he's 170 pounds, if I'm being honest. Like, he looks more like 155, and I always think it's funny that, and this isn't just Dylan Faison, I don't want to sound like I'm picking on him, but like a lot of these undersized wide receiver prospects in high school always are listed as like 170, 175 pounds. They're not, okay? They all look way too skinny to be that size, and I'm sure that in a few years, Dylan is going to bulk up. I mean, he's still only a sophomore in high school, so he's got plenty of time, but I just wanted to point that out. Either way, it doesn't matter what his weight is right now because he is extremely fast and elusive. He can juke people out of their shoes, and he can get separation from any player at any point on the field, which is especially impressive considering just how young Dylan is, and he's playing high school football in Florida, going up against quality competition. So the fact fact that he's able to do this at such a young age is really, really impressive. And it's not really a surprise that Notre Dame was able to get a commitment from Dylan, because Jordan is in the most ideal situation right now, because he's a very impactful player on 2 different varsity sports, and he got playing time very early in both of them. Like, even though it took him a little while to get on the field for the Notre Dame football team, he has been playing right away for the Notre Dame lacrosse team, and he has been dominating early on. Like, he's been making a ton of plays already in his career, and his future is really bright in both sports. So if you're Dylan and you also want to play college lacrosse and you also want to play college football, why wouldn't you want to go to Notre Dame when you watch the kind of success that your brother is having playing both sports? Because let's be honest, like, a lot of coaches and a lot of different programs out there, they don't really want their guys playing 2 sports. And now it's a little bit different with lacrosse and football because they're obviously at different times of the year, but it seems like Marcus Freeman and Coach Corrigan with Notre Dame lacrosse have figured out a good plan for Jordan. And even though all of his focus is on lacrosse right now because they're in season, obviously, and he's an important player on that team, he is still involved in spring practice, mostly as an observer up to this point. But I think it's important that he's getting access to both, and I think that they're carving out a perfect plan for Dylan once he eventually gets to campus at Notre Dame. And I think the only difference with Dylan and Jordan is that Dylan is not going to surprise anyone when he gets to campus like Jordan did. Like, Jordan flew under the radar, at least as a football player, right? He was like this walk-on who made some noise in fall camp. Like, he started beating some of the starters, and you're like, whoa, this guy's really fast, but he's also really not that big. And then didn't really play much at all up until the Louisville game. Then he comes in, and then he scores a touchdown in his first game ever, and you're like, hold on, wait a second, what is this kid capable of? And then he finishes his freshman season with 19 catches for 322 yards and 4 touchdowns. Plus, he was the MVP of the Sun Bowl, despite only really playing half the year. So now, as Jordan continues to shine in both sports, in lacrosse and football, his star continues to grow. I think he's just going to get better and better, and he's going to be more impactful, particularly for the football team than he was last season. Like, as his star continues to shine, the expectations for Dylan are only going to get higher and higher and higher. And you know what? That's a good thing. I think that you should want that for a guy like Dylan, and I think that the expectations for him are going to be really cool. And Notre Dame has had some great brother tandems in the past. The first one that comes to mind is the Aquara brothers. First, it was Romeo, who was a great edge rusher. Then his brother Julian came in and was also a really good player in college. And then they actually both ended up playing for the Lions. And then you also have like Jerron Jones and his little brother. Like, Notre Dame has been able to do this in the past, and I think that having a guy like Dylan come in and follow in the footsteps of Jordan could end up being a really, really cool story, because Jordan's story right now, what he's doing, is incredible by itself. And then you add in another one on top of that. I just think it's really, really cool. And as I said earlier, this is Notre Dame's first commitment in the class of 2026. It's not really a surprise that it's from Dylan Faison, considering his brother is on the team, but it just kind of shows you that Notre Dame, when they prioritize guys early, they know who they want, and more often than not, they get their answer back pretty early. And Notre Dame is already starting to build on that class of 2026. It started with the Pot of Gold Day. They were able to get these 2 commitments, and they've already got the ball rolling in the class of 2026, and they are still working on finishing the class of 2025 strong. I mean, adding Jerome Bettis Jr. was good for that. They still have some other top prospects that they still need to land to really have an elite class. Like, they have a really good class right now, but they still have a lot of work to do. And I just think that overall, you have to be really pleased with Notre Dame and what they're doing right now on the recruiting trail. It's a tough time for recruiting in college football, especially if you're not one of those big NIL schools. And I think what Notre Dame has done is really, really impressive. Also want to give a shout out to the entire recruiting department for all of the work that they did with Pot of Gold Day, with Dylan and Jerome Bettis Jr. as well. Like, there are so many people who work very, very hard in putting this whole thing together and getting commitments from these guys, and the amount of detail that they put in to every single letter and every single Pot of Gold Day presentation is really second to none. And like I said, they offer nearly 100 prospects. So there's a lot of time and a lot of effort put in by a bunch of different people. So my hats off goes to them, and their work is really starting to shine through here, and I'm very, very happy for them. But that is going to do it for me today. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. I will be back tomorrow morning with more recruiting coverage with Locked On's recruiting insider Brian Smith. I'm also going to be doing another mailbag show on Friday of this week. So if you've got questions, send them in. You can drop them below in the YouTube comments or send them on social media. At Locked On Irish is the Twitter. At Locked On Irish Pod is the Instagram. Also, please subscribe on YouTube or wherever listening to the podcast, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.